I'm Shahar Azani, and in the news, Israel at war, following Nazi Hamas's slaughter of that Black Sabbath, October 7th, 2023, which left around 1,400 people dead, killed, murdered, butchered, and massacred, innocent men, women, and children. Israel continues to attack Hamas in Gaza while coping with continuous fire from Hezbollah up north. With news of U.S. Secretary of State Blinken in Israel and President Biden expected to arrive in Israel on Wednesday, what should we expect as we move forward? And what does global diplomatic efforts around the world look like at the moment? Joining us all the way from Israel is our good friend, Ambassador Dani Ayalon. Ambassador Ayalon is an Israeli diplomat, columnist, and politician. He was Israel's ambassador to the United States, Deputy Foreign Minister, as well as Senior Foreign Policy Advisor to Prime Ministers Ariel Sharon, Ehud Barak, and Benjamin Netanyahu. Dani, it's so good to see you. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you, Shachar. Good to see you. I'm doing fine. My youngest daughter was drafted to a reserve unit in the paratroops. My older daughter is helping, sending packages for the troops in the front. My wife is all mobilized. She's the president of Magen David Adom internationally. So they get a lot of donations from all over the world, especially from Christians, for ambulances and medical equipment. So it's, the country is mobilized.
Yeah, we saw also a major donation made to American Friends of Magen David Adom by Michael Bloomberg.
Yes, absolutely. So, right. So everyone is helping, understanding that everybody's fate is on the line. It's not just Israel, but it's the entire Western world, free world as we know it.
What's the mood like in Israel at the moment? Can you say a few words about that?
Yes. Well, it's painful, and you cannot be but shocked with this barbarism. It's just satanic what we have seen. ISIS, the Nazis. The Nazis were not as brutal. The Nazis, of course, we know. I mean, this is the epitome of evil. But the Nazis, in comparison, were quote unquote sterile. They were sending us in an industrial, systematic way to the gas chambers. But here we saw butchering of live people and babies and burning, and it is just unimaginable. So it is painful, but on the other hand, we are determined and we're mobilized. We have been under attacks before, or not that as brutal as it is now, and we are fighting back. We are prevailing, and we will win this war. And hopefully, there will be a new Middle East order when we are done with that. But never ever. Yeah. We will subject our families, unarmed people, babies, to such brutality.
Incredible. You're absolutely correct. You have vast experience in the international arena, in the international PR arena when it comes to Israel. So let me first ask you about the PR arena. How do you see the trend moving? We've seen a lot of support for Israel. Is it changing?
Not yet, and I hope it will not soon. I do not kid myself. At some point, there will be a change, and the tide may turn against us. But at this point, and again, this is painful to say, but Hamas has done the job for us in the PR. No decent person, whether it's Muslim or not, can be indifferent to such, ghoulish pictures and such evil. So there is an understanding, of course, first and foremost in the United States, but also Europe, other countries, and the President Biden himself has been a real leader of, I would say, a Churchillian magnitude. And he's coming to visit us, and that's also sending a clear message to our enemies that we are together in here. One last thing I want to say on this subject, Shahar, I am appalled to see some pockets of support to Hamas, whether it's in American campuses or some other civil organizations. This is appalling, morally reprehensible, and we should ask them, who do you stand with? Are you standing with Satan or with human beings? It's nothing short than that. And I hope that the Jewish community.
Yeah, but I want to ask you, that was exactly my question. What do you think about those presidents of Ivy League schools and other campuses who refused to explicitly denounce, Nazi Hamas's terrorist actions, and rather say, similar to Stanford and Cornell, who said either there are too many tragedies in the world for us to interfere, or this is too politically complicated? What's your message to them, Danny?
My message is very clear. They should be isolated, they should be marginalized, and they should pay a price, whether by legislation, just like there is legislation against the Nazis and Nazi sympathizers. There should be legislation against Hamas, ISIS sympathizers, no less than that. And until then, I think the entire community, Jewish and non-Jewish community, should just rise as one in denouncing and in isolating those evil, I would say, forces.
What do you think? You mentioned President Biden's upcoming visit to Israel. Of course, I don't think there was any Israeli who was not incredibly touched and appreciative of the words that he has given to the people in Israel, the words of comfort, of humanity, of authenticity. What do you think the goal is of the president's visit to the region? Some people claim that he's coming to tie Israel's hands behind its back. What's your perception on this issue?
I would say the goal of the president's visit here is threefold. First of all, solidarity and support. Secondly, deterrence against Iran, against Hezbollah, anyone who might be tempted to join in on attacks on Israel. And thirdly, and not less importantly, is to think about the day after. I know it's too early to do that, but the president is going also to Jordan, Amman, where he will visit Arab leaders, Sisi from Egypt, of course, King Abdullah, and maybe Saudis. And the idea is to keep them abreast, the moderate Sunni countries, to keep them abreast with the situation, with the American policies, to make them understand what is the end goal here. And for this, it is very important to note that the ISIS, Hamas, the global jihadist movement is an enemy of the moderate Arab regimes, no less than it is of Israel and the United States. And this is something which is very important, and we need to keep them together on the day after. For instance, the Palestinians in Gaza, those who are not armed and not members of Hamas, will have to evacuate just in order to save their lives. They have nowhere to go but to Egypt, to the vast expanses of the Sinai Desert, where right now Sisi is opposing to that, but he will have to accept them. And of course, for that, American involvement should be very much present in terms of not just political support, but I think also financial support. And with a few $1 billion, I think that Sisi might be persuaded to do that, just like Erdogan, Turkey, who received 4 million refugees from Syria running from the butchery of Assad. And they were, and many of them are still, hosted by Turkey. And Turkey got a lot of money for that. I think this is the same solution, temporary solution, at this point for Gaza as well.
So you're saying that one of the things that potentially could be on the table is that movement of non-combatants, residents of Gaza, into the Sinai until Israel is done with its mission.
Absolutely. And this is just to save their lives, to spare their lives. By the way, this is not unprecedented in the annals of war. We just mentioned what happened in Syria and Turkey a few years back, but also, Shahar, our own people. We have also evacuated our own people from harm's way from our southern border towns. And so we use the same yardstick to our population and to their population. The fact that Hamas, of course, uses them as human shield and tries to actually prevent them from moving, it's another war crime that they are perpetrating. But we are determined, and hopefully we will see things move forward. And the message to Sisi is don't put your hand in the sand. Because if you don't accept it in an orderly fashion, which would be good for everyone, they will just stampede over and run over the barrier in Rafah to the Egyptian side. So better do it in a way which will spare lives and which will be orderly and which will be able to give them some decent accommodations until they can come back to Gaza.
And we know, of course, the dire economic situation in Egypt, so that might be also a potentially viable catalyst for such a decision by President Assisi. I want to ask you about the deterrence factor that you mentioned, because solidarity, of course, there is no doubt. We have seen Hezbollah continuously attacking IDF soldiers in Israel from the north, pinpointed, targeted attacks with missiles, killing and injuring Israelis, both soldiers and civilians. Do you think that deterrence works?
Well, remains to be seen. We thought we had deterrence against Hamas, and woefully we were so wrong. Well, Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. Iran may push them to do that. Right now, it's provocations. Right now, it's to show that they are not, let's say, leaving Hamas alone on this fight. They are not deserting them. But when it comes to Iran, I can tell you that we have not seen direct confrontation with Iran. Iran, in a cowardly way, is willing and is fighting till the last Palestinian, till the last Lebanese. They will fight to the last Yemenite or Iraqi or Syrian. So at this point, I think Hezbollah is making their own calculations, understanding that if they move in, they will, at the end of the day, suffer the same fate of Hamas, which again would be unconditional surrender, just like with the Nazis in Germany, 1945, with Imperial Japan in 1945. There is no other way but unconditional surrender with such evil and with such forces that are actually trying to blow up the entire world.
So, that leads me to, you're making, as always, great points. And I have to tell you, thank you on behalf of myself, our viewers, and everybody who listens to you for that clear analysis in such a complex situation. As far as the goals of the war, I just want to make it clear. Do you see a situation in which Hamas remains a viable sovereign in Gaza after this war? Is there any such scenario in your opinion?
No, and I hope not. And I wrote about it, and I talked to our current leaders about it. There is no coexistence with Hamas, like there was no coexistence with the Nazis. What happened in Nazi Germany? After the unconditional surrender, there was a process of denazification of Germany and then rebuilding the nation. That is exactly the model. After the defeat, the unconditional defeat of Hamas, they will not surrender. I do not kid myself. But until the doing away with them, there should be a process of de-Hamasization of Gaza, and then starting a project of nation building together with the Arab countries, Jordan, Egypt, together with the international community, until we are stabilizing the situation. To the extent that I would say a reasonable power can take over and run Gaza in a way that not only will allow us to live in peace, but will give the Palestinians a future of prosperity, of economic achievements together with Israel, and Israel will also play a major part in that, hopefully turning Gaza into Singapore. Again, it's not going to be overnight. It's going to be a process of many, many years. But we have to start it right after the war, the de-Hamasization of Gaza.
You're mentioning, Singapore. I'm just hoping that we're going to learn the mistakes of the past. But, one of the major points that you made was ramifications of the current situation, consequences on the ground. You mentioned it vis-a-vis U.S. campuses and anybody who supports Nazi Hamas ideology, that they need to be punished. And you can't be more correct and more spot on when it comes to this. But from your perspective as a seasoned expert and diplomat, the long-term ramifications of the relationships between the peoples. I mean, something was, even without the combatant part of it, we have seen many people in Gaza cheering what we saw on the streets of the towns and villages of the south, even accompanying those deeds by we saw the horrible sights, which I don't want to repeat. How do you see that impacting the Israeli people's view of Palestinians when it comes to the future of living side by side as neighbors?
No trust anymore. If there was any shred of trust, it all disappeared. And this is why whatever we do, we'll have to verify everything and to take everything they do and say with a grain of salt, with a maximum defense and with the maximum layers of defense for us. And the attitude in Gaza and also in the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria is no different than how they behaved after 9/11, where they were cheering in the rooftops and giving candies and laughing. No different than in 1990, August 1990, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. They were also cheering, in spite of the fact that the Kuwaitis were the hosting, giving them shelter, giving them jobs, giving them sustenance. But yet, they fled overnight. Everywhere the Palestinians were, they destroyed everything around them. Started back, in 1947, 48 here, and even before, with the pogrom of Hebron in 1929. Who did it? Palestinians. At that time, they were not even called Palestinians. Right. But the same goes in Jordan. Black September, September 1970. Arafat and the Palestinians tried to overthrow the king of Jordan, the father of this king, King Hussein, and take over Jordan. Same thing they did after they were thrown out of Jordan, hence Black September for them. In Lebanon, the same thing, thrown out in 82. Kuwait, we mentioned, everywhere they are. Now in Gaza, they do the same thing, and the people of Gaza are suffering if they will continue to cheer them. And if they will continue to support the ideology, then it's going to be a very, very long process. I wish, and here we cannot always learn from history because there is a difference in nature and in culture. Germany, before the Nazis, was a democratic country. They believed in humanity and liberal ideas. This is not the case in Hamas, like this is not the case in Iraq. This is why the Second Gulf War did not succeed. Building nation with the extreme jihadist Muslims was different, was difficult. Same thing here in Gaza. So this is why I'm saying it's a long, long process, but we will prevail because we have no other choice.
We have no other choice. I want to ask you something about the rationality, quote unquote, of Hamas. When such an organization has a control over a piece of land, it's a considerable achievement. And the fact that they had a control over a piece of land that was tolerated by Israel, in spite of their attacks, incitement, recurring rocket attacks, they still, Israel allowed in tens of thousands of workers whom we learn now were spies who mapped out the towns and villages of the south and played a part in the atrocities. Did they expect to survive? Do they have an expectation to survive this round by continuing to exercise control of Gaza? Or are they that hateful and irrational that all they wanted to do is kill Jews at all costs? How do you see this, Danny?
Well, first and foremost, you're right. And this was the collapse of our concept, political concept, which led to a failure of intelligence and failure of deployment and readiness of the military. But the way that they prepared, they were ready to actually go and occupy and conquer maybe half of the Negev. Maybe they were expecting also the second shoe to drop up north, and Hezbollah, had the Hezbollah used the same time, at the same time, doing the same thing over in the Galilee, we would have been in a much more dire situation than we are today. So the end goal is still the same. And it's still on their manifesto, the destruction, the total destruction of the Jewish state. For them, it's one Sharia, extreme Islamist state and region, and just as a stepping stone for the rest of the world. And this is what I'm trying to explain to mostly our European friends. If you look at the map, the geopolitical situation in the Middle East, you see the vast area of the Middle East with all these pockets of this vicious jihadist movements and organizations. They are all attacking Israel. Israel actually is the cork, which is actually putting right now the stop on this jihadist movement, which would in no time spill over, gush out of the bottle of the Middle East to Europe and beyond. And this is where I think that, and it should be much commended, that President Biden understands that the war here is not between Israel and the Hamas ISIS. The war here is between Western civilizations and between the jihadist movement, which just want death for everyone, including themselves, at the end of the day. So we will not be settled until we win this war, and we will win the war.
And we will. Last question, because I know you have to rush, Danny. We talked about, again, long-term ramifications. Do you see or expect to see a change in the international attitude towards Iran when it comes to, post this situation, when it comes to not just the nuclear discussions, but even its standing as a member in the community of nations? We've seen, foreign diplomats shaking the hand of the butcher, the president of Iran, Raisi. We've seen how Iran is welcomed on international media. Should that change after what we've seen and their support for such butchery?
This is an excellent point. Excellent point, Shahar. The short answer is yes. And now we should really focus our eye on the proxies of Iran, Hamas, maybe Hezbollah. But this cannot stop there, because as long as the Ayatollahs of Iran are there, conniving, preparing, financing, and subverting the entire region and beyond, we cannot be safe, and the world cannot be safe. So I think this would be, after this war is over, the first task of Israeli diplomacy would be to actually build this coalition that will stop the Iranians. And I think here also we should not stop short of a regime change. I know it's very hard, in the international community, people do not talk about regime change. It's almost illegitimate, but they did not prevent, they did talk about the regime change when it came to the Nazis or Imperial Japan back in 1945. Right. We need to see a regime change, and I believe that with the world pulling together, we can do that.
One of the main takeaways, just summarizing what you said, is when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. And I think this is where a lot of people failed in looking at Hamas, but also now looking forward, looking at Iran. Danny, I can't tell you how much we are thankful for your time, for your wisdom, for shining some light on the quagmire of the Middle East. We commend you for your strength, resilience, and optimism, even and especially during these dire times. And again, for your brilliant analysis. We're always the wiser after listening to you.
Very kind words, Shahar. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon again, I'm sure.
Yeah. Stay safe, sending you and your family best of wishes. We're all with you and with the people of Israel during these times, and hope to hear from you soon as we continue to monitor the situation. And to all of you, our viewers, we will continue to keep you updated as things move forward in Israel, which is always important to remind and remember is not just about Israel and Nazi Hamas, but has a greater moral and strategic meanings for Israel and for the world entire. May we see better days. I am Shahar Azani, and thank you all for watching.